Imagine 5 foods from one plant with zero cost forever. Why did they erase this knowledge? Picture this for a moment. It is 1943, the very heart of World War II. Across America, from the Atlantic coast to the rural farmlands of the Midwest, your grandmother and nearly 20 million other everyday citizens stepped outside with a simple conviction. They believed that if they could not control the war, they could still control how they fed their families. And so, they planted victory gardens everywhere, in backyards, side yards, church lots, behind factories, along fences, and even on rooftops. Here is the part that still stuns modern agriculture. Those humble gardens, tended by retirees, homemakers, teenagers, and factory workers on night shifts, produced 40% of all the vegetables consumed in the United States that year. Imagine that. It wasn't industrial farms or corporate supply chains. It was just regular Americans who refused to wait for someone else to put food on their tables. 40% was grown by people who believed that food security wasn't a distant system, but something you grew with your own 2 hands. But then the decades passed, and somewhere along the way, we were taught to forget that power. Today, we are told that feeding ourselves requires specialized fertilizers shipped across oceans, patented seeds we are not allowed to save, and global supply chains so fragile that a single storm or factory shutdown can empty entire aisles in the grocery store. We are told real self-reliance is complicated, expensive, and out of reach for anyone who doesn't have acres of land and a degree in agronomy. Yet what if none of that is true? What if there is a plant, one single species, that could grow right in your backyard on a simple trellis with almost no cost at all? A plant that produces 5 completely different foods from root to flower. A plant that manufactures its own nitrogen fertilizer out of thin air, enriching your soil as it grows. A plant that contains more protein than almost anything you have ever harvested from a home garden. What if the most prestigious scientific institution in America studied this plant in 1975 and declared it quite literally a supermarket on a single stalk? But after that, there was silence. Research funding disappeared. Agricultural programs quietly moved on, and a crop that could have transformed home food security, especially for seniors and small growers, simply drifted out of public memory. This isn't folklore or a garden myth from a forgotten seed catalog. This is a documented, peer-reviewed, government-funded truth that faded not because it failed, but because it didn't fit the modern model of agricultural profit. That plant is the winged bean. For many of you watching today, especially those who lived through the Victory Garden era or grew up hearing stories about it, this is a piece of knowledge that was meant for your generation because you remember what it felt like to grow food with purpose, community, and confidence. Now, as more people rediscover the value of homegrown nutrition, this forgotten plant may be exactly the kind of wisdom that needs to return to American soil. Let's begin the journey, because the story of the winged bean is not just about a plant, it is about the power we once had and can reclaim again. It is the report they don't want you to remember. Let's step forward from the Victory Garden era into the mid-1970s when something extraordinary happened. Something most Americans never heard about, even though it came from the highest scientific authority in the nation. In 1975, the United States National Academy of Sciences gathered a panel of the most respected botanists, agronomists, and food security researchers in the country. Their mission was simple but urgent: to identify overlooked tropical crops with the potential to fight global hunger, especially in regions where industrial agriculture had repeatedly failed. They were searching for resilience, nutrition, and adaptability. They were searching for crops that didn't need chemical crutches or perfect soil. Out of hundreds of species, one plant didn't just stand out. It stopped the entire committee in their tracks. It was the winged bean, Sophocarpus tetragonalobus, a vigorous climbing vine native to Papua New Guinea in Southeast Asia. When the scientists examined it, they didn't write the usual cautious, careful language of academic reports. No, they broke character. They called this plant exceptional. They emphasized that nearly every part of it was edible, nutritious, and versatile. They even suggested it had the potential to address hunger at a global scale. Keep in mind, this wasn't a gardening magazine or a hobbyist group. This was the National Academy of Sciences, the same institution responsible for advising Congress and shaping national research priorities. When they say a plant deserves attention, that means something. But what exactly made this vine so astonishing? First, the seeds. They contain between 34 and 40% protein, rivaling and in some tests even surpassing soybeans, which are considered the gold standard of plant protein. But unlike soy, wing bean seeds naturally contain all the essential amino acids in balanced proportions. That means complete protein without special processing, without additives, and without the digestive issues some people get from soy products. For gardeners, especially older adults looking to strengthen muscle and bone health, that is a nutrition powerhouse growing in your own yard. Then come the leaves, as tender and nutritious as spinach, packed with protein, calcium, and iron. You harvest them the same way you would a leafy green, fresh for salads, sautéed for dinner, or mixed into soups. Next are the flowers, delicate pale blue blossoms that have been used for generations in Southeast Asian cooking. They add color, subtle sweetness, and more nutrition than most edible flowers Americans are familiar with. But the part most gardeners fall in love with is the young pods. They have four beautiful ridges, four wings running the length of each pod, giving the plant its name. They are crisp, tender, and bright, with a flavor that people describe as asparagus blended with green beans. They are delicious raw, steamed, stir-fried, or sliced into salads. They are the kind of vegetable you harvest in handfuls and find yourself eating right in the garden before they ever reach the kitchen. And the mature seeds, dry them like any bean, grind them into flour, or roast them to use as a high-protein staple food. They contain substantial healthy fats and offer endless culinary possibilities. Then comes the part that truly made researchers lean forward in their chairs: the tubers hidden underground. These starchy roots contain up to 10 times more protein than a potato. Think about that. A root crop that is not just a source of calories, but a legitimate source of protein, something almost unheard of in nature. 5 foods, 1 plant, from root to flower, nutritious from top to bottom. It is a complete food system wrapped into a single vine. And yet, believe it or not, this still isn't the most remarkable part. Because while the winged bean can feed your body, it also has the power to feed your soil completely on its own, without one drop of synthetic fertilizer. That, as we will soon uncover, is where its real threat to the modern agricultural system begins. If the winged bean's 5 different food sources weren't impressive enough, this next part is where the story turns from remarkable to almost unbelievable. This plant doesn't just nourish you, it nourishes the very soil it grows in, quietly and continuously, without a single scoop of store-bought fertilizer. Like all true legumes, the winged bean forms a partnership underground with microscopic organisms called nitrogen-fixing bacteria. These tiny allies gather inside small nodules along the roots, and together they perform a transformation that borders on magic. They take pure nitrogen from the air, the same air around us that is 78% nitrogen, and they convert it into a form that plants can actually use. What does that mean for you, the home gardener, especially those who have watched fertilizer prices skyrocket over the years? It means this plant feeds itself. It manufactures its own nitrogen, the very nutrient that most vegetables are desperate for and that people spend billions trying to replace with synthetic fertilizers. But the real gift is this: the winged bean doesn't stop with feeding itself. It enriches the soil it grows in, leaving behind a reservoir of slow-release nitrogen for whatever you plant next season: your tomatoes, your peppers, or your fall greens. Your soil becomes richer, healthier, and more alive simply because this plant grew there. Think about that for a moment. In today's agricultural world, the United States alone participates in a global market where over $200 billion a year is spent on synthetic nitrogen fertilizers. These fertilizers are produced in massive, energy-hungry factories that depend on natural gas. They are shipped across oceans, hauled across highways, and then spread onto fields where only a portion actually benefits the crops. The rest either washes into groundwater, contributing to pollution and algae blooms, or escapes into the atmosphere as potent greenhouse gases. And yet, here we have a humble vine, a plant most Americans have never even heard of, doing the same job quietly and effortlessly, without pollution, without factories, and without a single dollar spent. It creates nitrogen on its own for free, and in doing so, improves the soil beneath your feet. This is not just an interesting footnote. This strikes at the heart of a system built on selling fertilizer, seed treatments, and endless solutions that gardeners are told they must purchase year after year. A plant that provides its own nutrition and improves the land for future crops challenges an entire business model that depends on repeat customers. So when you look at the winged bean, don't just see a high-protein food source. See a soil builder, a fertilizer factory that operates underground, and a partner that works with nature, not against it. For gardeners, especially seniors who want healthier soil without heavy bags, expensive amendments, or chemicals that harm the environment, this plant offers something priceless. Independence. Independence from fertilizers, independence from high costs, and independence from a system that profits when your soil grows weaker, not stronger. The winged bean is living proof that nature already solved problems the modern world insists we must buy our way out of. The more you understand how this plant works, the more you realize why so few people have ever heard its name. Let's look at what happened after the National Academy of Sciences raised the flag in 1975. What unfolds next is not a scientific failure. It is a story shaped by priorities and by profit. After that glowing report, research stations across the tropics began testing the winged bean. Trials were launched in the Philippines, in Papua New Guinea, and in parts of Africa where food security challenges were greatest. The results confirmed everything the Academy had written: nutrient density, adaptability, soil improvement, and resilience in poor soils. In Papua New Guinea, where local communities had grown the winged bean for centuries, it wasn't a laboratory experiment at all. It was already a staple food woven into daily life. People ate the pods, the leaves, the seeds, and even the tubers. It wasn't exotic or new, it simply worked. But then something odd began to happen. Despite the success, research activity slowed. Funding that had been promised for expansion programs never arrived. Plans for large-scale agricultural rollout programs that could have brought the winged bean to millions of small farmers quietly dissolved. Extension programs faded, universities moved on, and the question becomes, why? To answer that, we have to look at what else was emerging during the very same period. In the late 1970s and moving through the 80s and 90s, agrochemical corporations began investing billions into a new generation of crops, genetically modified varieties designed to pair with patented herbicides. Then in 1996, just 20 years after the winged bean report, Monsanto released Roundup-ready soybeans. These were seeds engineered to survive being sprayed with Roundup, Monsanto's own herbicide. The business model was stunningly effective. Farmers bought the seeds, but they did not own them. Each bag came with a licensing agreement. They could plant the seeds, but they were prohibited from saving any for the next year. That meant every season required a new purchase, and every acre needed Monsanto's chemical package to go with it. By 2005, nearly 87% of all soybean fields in the United States were planted with these glyphosate-resistant varieties. Roundup Ready had become the backbone of industrial agriculture, creating a closed loop of dependency. Seeds you must buy annually paired with chemicals you must also buy annually, all held under patent. Compare that with the winged bean. The winged bean requires none of this. There is no annual seed purchase, no licensing agreement, and no chemical inputs. It fertilizes itself and even improves the land for the next crop. It thrives in soils considered too poor for commercial crops, and every gardener or small farmer can save their own seeds for free year after year. Two paths lay before the agricultural world. One path led to recurring revenue, intellectual property, corporate control, and guaranteed annual sales. The other path led to independence, resilience, and something modern economists rarely talk about: food sovereignty, the ability to feed yourself without needing approval or products from anyone else. Now ask yourself honestly, which path do you think attracted billions of dollars in research funding, and which path quietly faded into the background? It didn't fade because it lacked value, but because it lacked profitability for the people who shape agricultural priorities. This timeline tells us something crucial. The winged bean wasn't forgotten because it failed. It was forgotten because it succeeded in ways that didn't benefit the people holding the checkbook. That is exactly why gardeners, especially seniors, who remember what self-reliance truly feels like, need to hear this story now. At this point, you might be thinking, well, that's fascinating history, but I live in Ohio, or Tennessee, or North Carolina. Isn't this a tropical plant? That's a fair question, because for decades, that misconception is exactly what kept gardeners across America from ever trying the winged bean. But here's the good news, and it may surprise you. You can grow winged beans in much of the United States, not just in the deep tropics or far-off places with steamy jungles, but right here across the South, the Southeast, large parts of the Southwest, and even up along the coasts. If you can grow tomatoes through the summer or pole beans, your climate is almost certainly warm enough for wing beans. The plant thrives in USDA hardiness zones 8 through 12, which covers millions of American backyards. And even for those just outside those zones, there is an exciting development that changes everything. Plant breeders around the world have spent decades quietly working on a breakthrough: day-length neutral varieties. Traditionally, winged beans needed short days, under 12 hours of daylight, to trigger flowering. That meant in northern regions, the plants finally bloomed in late fall right as frost arrived, so gardeners simply gave up. But varieties like Hunan and Urizun have rewritten the rules. These day-neutral strains will flower and produce pods all summer long as nighttime temperatures stay above 70 degrees. If you enjoy a frost-free period of around 120 days, something states like Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, California, and even Virginia easily provide, you can grow winged beans successfully. Gardeners across these regions are already doing it. The best part is that seeds are not difficult to find. Kitchen Garden Seeds offers day-neutral varieties. Several heirloom growers on Etsy carry organic, open-pollinated strains, and Baker Creek often lists winged bean seeds in their catalog. Because this plant isn't part of the industrial agricultural machine, these seeds come without licensing agreements, without restrictions, and without the need to buy them year after year. Let's talk about what it's like to grow the plant itself. The winged bean behaves much like a vigorous pole bean, climbing 10 to 12 feet in a single season. Give it full sun and something sturdy to climb, a trellis, a fence, or even tall corn stalks, and it will reward you with steady production once flowering begins. When the pods are young, just 1 to 3 inches long, that's when they are at their most tender, with that lovely asparagus meets green bean flavor. As the pods mature, you can leave a few to dry and harvest the protein-rich seeds. And if you decide to explore the tuber-producing varieties, you can dig up the starchy, high-protein roots at the end of the season. An entirely different harvest from the same plant. Why does this matter to you right now? Because the winged bean isn't just a tropical curiosity. It is a real, practical, growable crop for everyday Americans, including seniors looking for nutritious, low-maintenance, high-value plants that enrich the soil rather than deplete it. It is proof that your garden can still surprise you, that forgotten knowledge can return, and that you don't need a corporation to feed your family. You need seeds, sunlight, and a little bit of courage to try something new. The winged bean gives you 5 foods, natural fertilizer, and soil restoration, all from a single vine. Now that you know it can grow right here in America, the question isn't whether this plant can change your garden. The real question is whether you're ready to let it. Before we go any further, let me make something absolutely clear. We are not talking about a shadowy backroom meeting where powerful people sat around a long table and said, "Let's bury the winged bean." Real life rarely works like that. There is no dramatic conspiracy with secret files and coded messages. But what did happen is in many ways far more subtle and far more powerful. In agriculture, just like in medicine, energy, or technology, the biggest threat to profit is independence. The winged bean, with all its gifts, creates exactly the kind of independence that doesn't fit neatly into a billion-dollar business model. Imagine you're a research funding agency with 2 proposals. Option A is the winged bean, a tropical legume that farmers can grow in poor soil, that fertilizes itself, produces multiple foods, and allows people to save their own seeds and replant indefinitely. It solves real problems like protein deficiency, soil depletion, and fertilizer costs, but it generates no recurring revenue. There's no patentable trait, no annual seed orders, and no chemical package that must be purchased year after year. Then there's option B, a genetically modified soybean designed to pair with a proprietary herbicide. Farmers buy the seed each season because they are contractually forbidden from saving any. The seeds require specialized chemicals, and the corporation behind it earns billions in guaranteed repeat sales, giving them the resources to lobby governments, run marketing campaigns, and influence future research. Which proposal is more likely to receive funding? Not because it is better for the soil, more nutritious, or serves small farmers, but because it guarantees ongoing revenue. This isn't conspiracy. This is market logic, cold, predictable, and indifferent to human well-being. Market logic isn't designed to protect your food security. It's designed to protect shareholder returns. And so, through the 1980s and 1990s, while the largest fertilizer companies posted record profits and patented seed technologies consolidated into fewer corporate hands, the winged bean quietly disappeared into storage. It wasn't destroyed or outlawed. It was simply ignored, preserved inside germplasm banks, documented in dusty reports, and tucked away in collections rather than planted in living soil. Meanwhile, fertilizer costs exploded. By 2022, the top 9 fertilizer companies earned $57 billion in profit, 4 times what they earned just 2 years earlier. To put that into perspective, those profits alone were 30 times greater than the total amount American farmers spent on imported fertilizer that same year. While everyday farmers and gardeners struggled with skyrocketing prices, corporations were celebrating quarter after quarter of historic earnings. All the while, a plant existed, quiet, humble, forgotten, capable of producing its own nitrogen fertilizer, reducing dependency, and giving people back a measure of control over their food supply. The winged bean could have shielded millions of small growers from this cycle of rising costs and shrinking margins. The truth is, it still can. But first, someone has to tell the story. Someone has to bring the knowledge back into the light. Someone has to say there is another way, and nature already designed it, and that someone today is you. If you're in your 60s, 70s, or 80s, you carry a memory that younger generations rarely talk about anymore, because you lived through a time when America grew its own food, not as a trend, but as a way of life. There was a moment in this country when nearly 80% of U.S. households kept a garden. Gardening wasn't a hobby then. It was practical, purposeful, and in many communities, even patriotic. It was something Americans did together, believing that strength could grow from soil, seed, and shared responsibility. Somewhere along the way, that shifted. We were taught that our food comes from supermarkets, not from our hands, that gardening is charming but unnecessary, and that real agriculture belongs to massive operations with million-dollar machinery and lab-designed seeds. But you remember something different. You remember when growing food was normal, expected, and deeply satisfying. What's remarkable is that right now, a new generation is rediscovering exactly what you already knew. During the pandemic, home food growing surged, and researchers noticed that people who grew even a small amount of their own food experienced lower food insecurity and better mental well-being. Communities began reviving victory garden traditions in backyards, church lots, and shared plots. Young families and retirees alike turned to the soil for comfort, stability, and purpose. This is where you come in, because you are uniquely positioned to lead this revival. Gardening keeps your body moving, your mind focused, and your spirit grounded. Your wisdom is an asset younger growers are hungry for. Imagine this. It's early spring, and you plant a single row of winged beans. By late summer, you're reaching up to harvest tender, crisp green pods with that delightful asparagus-like flavor. Maybe you pick a handful of pale blue flowers to brighten a salad. Perhaps you set aside a portion of mature seeds to dry, seeds packed with more complete protein than many foods in the supermarket. As autumn approaches, you gently pull up the vines and discover the starchy, protein-rich tubers nestled in the soil. The soil beneath them is enriched by nitrogen created naturally by the plant, healthier and ready for next year's crops. You set aside a few pods for seed, package them in small envelopes, and hand them to your neighbor or your grandchildren. You bring some to your gardening club and watch people's eyes light up as they learn about a crop that should never have been forgotten. In that moment, you're not just gardening. You're restoring a piece of American memory. You're passing forward knowledge that someone, somewhere quietly allowed to fade. You're showing the next generation that independence can grow in a backyard and that forgotten wisdom can rise again. This isn't just gardening, this is legacy, and it's yours to carry forward. Now let's get practical. To begin, winged bean seeds have a naturally tough outer coat. Before planting, gently nick each seed with a file or the tip of a knife, just enough to let water pass through. Then soak them in warm water for 24 to 48 hours. The seeds that swell are ready for the soil. Timing and warmth are everything. Wait until all danger of frost has passed and your soil temperature has reached at least 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Choose the brightest, hottest spot in your garden. Plant each seed about an inch deep, spaced 1 to 2 feet apart. Remember, the winged bean is an enthusiastic climber. Before planting, set up a sturdy support system like a trellis or a fence. These vines can reach 10 to 13 feet. Caring for them is simple. They enjoy consistent moisture but not soggy soil. You don't need to fertilize them. They create their own nitrogen. When harvest season arrives, pick the green pods young, between 1 and 4 inches long. For mature seeds, allow pods to fully ripen and dry on the vine. The leaves can be harvested like spinach, and the flowers can be picked as they bloom. If you're growing a tuber-producing variety, dig up the roots at the end of the season. Saving seed is easy. Allow a few pods to dry on the plant, collect the seeds, and store them in a cool, dry place. This story is much larger than a single crop. The winged bean is a case study into something that has been happening for decades. Across the world, thousands of neglected plants sit tucked away in seed banks. Many are nutritional powerhouses that regenerate soil and endure harsh conditions better than commodity crops. Yet they rarely receive research funding because they cannot be easily patented. They make gardeners and small farmers more self-sufficient, and self-sufficiency does not show up on a company's balance sheet as profit. But it does show up in your life as independence. When you grow plants like the winged bean, you are participating in a kind of quiet resistance rooted in wisdom. You are strengthening local food networks and reducing reliance on fragile supply chains. This movement is being led by people in your generation who still remember what real security feels like. The winged bean is more than a vine. It's a reminder of what's possible when we return to simple truths. Soil, seed, sunlight, and the willingness to grow something the world forgot. Help this plant take root again. Help this knowledge live again. Help this story spread. When you do, you are not just planting a seed, you are planting possibility and a future that belongs once again to the hands of ordinary gardeners. They didn't erase it, they just made you forget. The 1975 National Academy of Sciences report still exists. Farmers in Southeast Asia never stopped growing it. What disappeared was your access to the knowledge that it exists. But forgotten knowledge can be rediscovered. Awareness turns into action, and a gardener becomes a steward of wisdom. You are the generation that once grew 40% of America's vegetables. You never needed permission then, and you certainly do not need it now. All you need are seeds, a bit of knowledge, and the willingness to grow something the modern system quietly hoped you'd never hear about. The winged bean is waiting, your garden is waiting, and the next chapter belongs to you. If this story changed how you view the potential of your own backyard, please subscribe and like this channel. We are uncovering the history they tried to bury. Plant the future. The next treasure will be revealed soon.